Hello everybody. So here we are on the first day of our new world, our temporary new world. So I wanted to still stay connected with you all. I wanted to share yoga. I wanted to breathe, and we'll just need to do all of this from home. So there's every chance that you might see my cat or my dog wander into the shot and join us for a few poses, but we'll see what happens. So I'm here at home in my living room, which has been turned into a temporary yoga studio, and I'm guessing you're probably at home in yours as well. So here's to staying connected during this time. So I thought I might just begin by offering a really little short practice, maybe just a bit of breathing, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of gentle movement, and that might be a nice entry for us into practicing together online. So I'd like to invite you into a sitting position or a position, really any position is fine, but if you're comfortable seated, then you might choose to just sit in a shape that feels nice and easy for you to be in for a few minutes. You're welcome to close your eyes if that feels okay for you. You're also welcome to keep your eyes open or perhaps to have your eyes semi-closed. And let's just begin by taking a moment to notice any sounds that we can hear around us. And maybe there are a lot of sounds where you are right now. And maybe there are very few sounds, and possibly there might be some subtle or quieter sounds that you might be able to hear around you and in your home and perhaps outside, maybe even in the distance. And perhaps you might send your awareness of sound as far out in all directions as you can. Kind of like you're casting a net or sending out a radar to listen for all of the sounds around you. And you might move from sound to sound like a butterfly moves from flower to flower. Just landing on that sound for a moment and then off you go looking for another one. Maybe you revisit the same sound multiple times. And then gradually beginning to draw your attention back towards your body and landing your awareness lightly on the surface of your skin. And maybe you've just landed on one particular part of your body, or maybe you've landed on your whole body. Maybe your awareness is on your whole skin surface. And just like you were listening to sounds a moment ago, perhaps you might now begin to listen to sensations. And there are so many different sensations that are available to you to notice. And it will be very unique for each person, so there's no wrong way to practice this. So perhaps you might notice a sensation of warmth somewhere. Maybe it's your hand resting on your leg or your foot against another part of your leg. Maybe you have sensations of coolness. Maybe there are sensations that have movement to them. Perhaps there's a beating or a drumming, thrumming. Maybe there's wriggliness or tickliness, prickly. So many different sensations that are available. And maybe some of them are in your experience now. And perhaps you're moving your awareness through your body and around the surface of your skin, noticing perhaps lots of different sensations. Maybe some are louder than others. Or maybe you have a whole body sensation happening. And also, it's very possible that you might have no sensation, or that there might be parts of your body where there are no sensation, and this is normal as well. And then gradually you might begin to move even further inward, perhaps beginning to notice more of an inner landscape, your inner landscape. So now you might perhaps begin to notice such things as feelings, emotions, or thoughts. And again, there's any number of different feelings, emotions, or thoughts that might be visiting with you in any given moment. And sometimes we even have conflicting or opposite emotions present at the same time. Maybe you're feeling happy and sad. Maybe you're feeling curious and nervous. Maybe you have a more kind of neutral experience right now. Just noticing and allowing this moment to be a snapshot of yourself right now on this day, on this moment, knowing that this moment will never ever happen again, so you will never be this person ever again. And then perhaps you might begin to notice your breath. And you might begin to feel the flow of your breath as it flows in and out. And maybe you're breathing through your nostrils. If your nostrils are blocked, then you'll need to breathe through your mouth. If it feels helpful, you might lengthen your breath just a little bit. Maybe taking a slightly longer breath in and feeling a little bit more of a fullness to your lungs, to your ribs, to your belly. And maybe a slightly longer breath out and allowing all of your lungs to empty. And if it feels okay for you to continue breathing like this, you could do so, and you might also begin to add a little micro movement. So maybe as you breathe in and fill your lungs, you might even lift the center of your chest up a little bit, and maybe even turn your face just slightly up towards the sky. And as you breathe out, you might begin to recede your heart back a little bit, as though you're just tucking it into the back of your body. And maybe your chin gently comes down just a little way towards your chest. And these movements might be quite small if you're choosing to do them at all. Just beginning to connect to breath and movement and the way that they work together. Perhaps you might plant your attention in the center of your chest and imagine as though your heart is here in the center of your chest. And maybe you are leading with your heart forward as you inhale, and then gently drawing your heart backward as you exhale. And maybe there are different sensations, emotions, feelings, or thoughts that might be with you as you're practicing this. Perhaps it feels delicious for you to open your heart. Perhaps it feels a little precarious. Perhaps it feels comforting for you to soften and recede your heart. Or perhaps there's another experience that you discover there. And then when you're ready, you might like to find your way back to center, perhaps somewhere between lifting and receding of your heart. Just allowing your heart to float there in your chest, your heart space. And then when you're ready, you might like to extend your legs out in front if they're not already extended in front. And perhaps you might place your hands down beside you if that feels like a helpful support for you, or you might choose to place your hands somewhere else. Your eyes could be open or closed, and you might begin to take your attention to your feet and your toes. And in whatever way feels interesting for you, you might begin to move your feet and your toes. So you might do one at a time, Or you might do them both at the same time. Maybe they're doing the same thing, maybe they're doing different things. And as you're moving your feet and your toes, there's an invitation to really feel and sense. How does it feel when I point my toe or scrunch my toes? Is there any sensation in my heels right now? What else can you notice about your feet and your toes right now? Your movements might be quite big, they might be quite fast, they might be slow and small, or a mixture of all of those things. And then when you're ready, you might begin to find stillness again, and perhaps taking a little moment of connection with your feet and your toes. Maybe noticing any sensations that are present there. And then maybe you might begin to slide one of your heels along the floor as it comes towards you, and then perhaps you might drop your knee out towards your side. And then maybe you reverse that flow, drawing your knee back to center and then extending your leg away. And once again, noticing any sensations that you experience as you practice this. Maybe you feel your foot peeling away from the floor and then coming back to the floor again. Maybe you feel your heel sliding along the floor. Maybe it's a bit of a bumpy slide, or maybe it's smooth on the carpet. And is it possible and helpful for you to add your breath into this? So is there a way that you might link your breath and your movement and notice, does that feel helpful for you or does it not feel helpful? And then you get to choose whether you do that or not. So the next time your knee comes out to your side, feel free to pause there for a moment. Now, if you do happen to have yoga props at home, you're most welcome to place maybe a block underneath your knee if that feels helpful. You might have a thick book that you can use instead. And then maybe you might like to just sit up nice and tall on your sitting bones. And if you find that your hamstring is feeling quite tight today, you certainly don't have to have a straight leg. You might just bend your leg. You could even roll up a towel and place it underneath your leg. And then from here, you might like to take a breath in and perhaps raise your arms up and overhead. And as you breathe out, you could either fold straight forward with your arms extended, or you could drop your arms down and slide them along the floor towards your leg. And you might start to feel a bit of a stretch in the back of your leg here. Perhaps you might hold here for a moment or two. Feel free to have movement. If movement feels helpful, you might sway or rock or move your head, shoulders. And then when you're ready, you might like to bring your hands back along the floor and then maybe raising them up and overhead again. Perhaps feeling length from your sitting bones connected to the floor, out through your fingertips, but still creating a nice space around your head and neck by allowing your shoulders to drop down. The next time you exhale, you might like to move towards a twist, crossing one hand over your body towards your bent knee, and your other hand might just come behind you, and perhaps you might pause there for a little twist. Again, this doesn't have to be still. If it feels interesting or helpful, you might begin to turn your head to look towards one shoulder, and then to look towards your other shoulder. There might be other movements that you feel are helpful for you as well, so feel free to add those in. Your yoga practice doesn't for any moment have to be rigid, have to be the same every time. Moving and breathing and being in your body will be different on each day depending on how it is you find yourself arriving in your practice. So the next time you breathe in, you might like to raise your arms up overhead again, and then we could fold forward over our legs. So you might be sliding your hands along the floor, or maybe you're reaching your arms out as you fold and then letting them find the floor. Again, you could breathe in and rise up. And as you breathe out, you might like to turn towards your bent leg again and take a twist. So you're welcome to continue with this flow of movement in a way that really serves you. So that might mean that you're choosing to just hold and breathe in one of these shapes for a few moments before changing to the other one. Or it might mean that you're moving rhythmically from shape to shape, if that feels like a more nourishing practice for you. Please feel free to modify, adapt, or change the shapes in any way so that they really serve you today in your body for your practice. If you are moving up and down and you're choosing to keep your arms overhead when you fold forward over your leg, you might find it helpful to draw your core muscles in a little bit. So to activate your lower abdominal muscles, maybe a little bit of pelvic floor squeeze, just to help support your spine as you're moving back and forth. And then when you're ready, taking all the time you need to complete what you're doing, feel free to find your way back to center. And then you might just like to draw your knee back in again and extend your leg out long. And then when you're ready, you might like to take that whole sequence on your other side. So we began by drawing our foot in towards us, and then we let our knee drop out towards the side. And then we reverse that sequence. So you might need to adapt or adjust, and as I can't see you right now, I don't know exactly what it is that you're working with. So if you were working perhaps with pregnancy, then you might need to take your knee out to the side a little bit so that you've got a little bit more space. If you're working with injury, you might need to do a little bit less. Maybe you even need to use your hands to help your leg find that movement pathway. Again, there's really no wrong way to practice. And when you're moving slowly and mindfully, then it's very unlikely that you'll be doing anything that's going to hurt you. At some point, you might choose to pause with your leg out towards your side, and then you might like to bring a block or a support, a cushion, a folded blanket underneath your knee if you find that helpful. And then from here, maybe you might raise your arms up overhead, feeling that sense of length from your sitting bones all the way up through the sides of your waist and out through your fingers, still allowing there to be space around your neck and shoulders by dropping your arms down. Another option is to take your arms a little wider or maybe bend them just to create more space around your neck and shoulders. When you're breathing out next, you might be folding forward from your hip creases with your arms extended out overhead, or maybe you're folding forward by taking your hands down and sliding them along the floor, and that might just give you a little bit more support. And then perhaps for a moment or two you might pause here, maybe taking a bit of a stretch through the back of your extended leg. Remember that your leg can be bent or straight. On your next inhalation, you might like to draw your hands along the floor and back up and overhead, reaching tall and long through your gorgeous spine. And then perhaps moving towards your bent leg, you could take a twist, crossing one hand over towards your knee, other hand can come to the floor behind you. And you might use a little bit of strength to take you into your twist, but just gentle, always gentle. And then maybe here you're holding in stillness, or maybe you're moving a little bit, and that movement could include perhaps the turning of your head from side to side. Maybe you're focusing more on your breath, on lengthening or deepening or connecting to your breath. And maybe you have something else that you're working with, perhaps it's sensation. The next time you breathe in, you might like to raise your arms up and overhead, and then you're welcome to practice flowing back and forth between folding forward over your leg and then moving into your twist. Or if it suits you better, then you're welcome to just pause and hold these shapes for a few breaths. It's really your choice because it's your body and it's your practice. Perhaps you call on your breath to become an active participant in this moment. So maybe you're breathing and moving simultaneously. Perhaps it feels good to breathe out when you twist and to breathe in when you come to center. Maybe you breathe out as you fold forward, and then you might breathe in as you come back to center again, but perhaps for you it works differently, and that's okay. You might like to take a few more moments here to really feel and sense and connect to your body, your breath, the sensations, emotions and thoughts that are with you right now in your practice. And then when you're ready, once again, taking your time to find your way back to center. And you might like to just bring your knee in towards your chest and then perhaps release your leg out long. And maybe it feels helpful just to give your legs a little wiggle. And then from here, let's find our way towards tabletop shape, or sometimes we call that hands and knees. And if you are practicing today on quite a firm surface, you might find it helpful to have a folded blanket or a towel underneath your knees, perhaps for a little bit of extra support. And if you are somebody that does have trouble with your wrists, something that can sometimes help is to just roll up the end of your mat, or if you're not working on your mat, you might just have a rolled towel or blanket, and you could place the heels of your hands, these parts down the bottom, on your mat and your fingers down on the floor. And that just takes a little bit of the curve out of your wrists. So if you need that, you could do that. Alternatively, you could come up onto your fists, or you could use your blocks underneath your elbows, or a stack of books. So from here, you might like to place your knees underneath your hips and your hands underneath your shoulders. And then when you're ready, you might begin to move your spine. So there's so many ways that you can move these 24 vertebrae that you have in your spine. You might begin with our classic cat-cow shape, so maybe you're arching and doming your spine. Or maybe you're practicing with some side-to-side movement, or some circular movement, or some sort of snaking kind of movement. You might imagine as though you have a huge, enormous tail, and you're wagging your tail slowly from side to side. Feeling free to be as creative as you choose, or to stay with something that feels familiar and helpful for you. It's really your choice. Once again, if noticing your breath feels like a useful addition, then you might take a moment to add that in. Maybe you find a way of breathing that creates a yoga or a union with your breath, your body, and your movement. And sometimes we find little spots that feel really delicious or helpful to be in. So feel free to spend some time in little spots that feel good for you. Our yoga practice has so many benefits, and curiosity and discovery around how our bodies move and what's feeling helpful, what feels good, or what feels as though it's in service to our well-being. This is all part of the practice of yoga. So gradually in your own time, you might find your way back towards child's pose. In child's pose, sometimes you can place your forehead to the floor, if that feels good, or you might bring your forearms in and perhaps float your head. And if you do have perhaps knees or ankles that don't really find this position particularly comfortable, you could place a cushion or bolster in between your heels and your buttocks, or you could just bring your weight a little bit further forward so that the crease in your knees is not so deep. And in this shape, again, you might find that stillness is serving you most today. So you might be still, or maybe it feels helpful for you to have a little bit of movement. So maybe you're rocking a little from side to side, through your hips, or maybe you're rolling your forehead from side to side on the floor or on the backs of your hands or wherever your head might be resting. And child's pose can be a position that really lends itself to noticing breath, and particularly to working with deep abdominal belly breaths. So when we breathe deep down into our lower belly, we support ourselves to feel a sense of calm, to digest, to rest, to recover. So you might like to exaggerate that a little bit just to help yourself connect. So maybe you might take a deep breath into your lower belly and really press your belly into your thighs. And then you might soften and let everything relax a little bit more. And if you've chosen to practice breath awareness, maybe you might notice a swelling or filling in the sides of your waist, possibly into your lower back. Maybe not, it might be different for you. And then when you're ready, you might like to make your way up onto your hands and knees once again, and then perhaps you might begin to spread your fingers nice and wide. Middle fingers might point straight ahead, unless you need to shift to allow for comfort in your wrists. And then you could tuck your toes under and begin to lift your hips up towards our downward facing dog shape. So perhaps in this shape you might begin by bending your knees quite a lot, almost like you're going to sort of jump out of the starting blocks for a race. And by bending your knees, it can often enable you to then begin to really lengthen your spine and to find that sense of length from your tailbone all the way through to the crown of your head. And sometimes when we straighten our legs straight away in this shape, if our hamstrings are a little tight, we tend to round our backs and we sort of lose our alignment here. So if it feels helpful for you to bend your knees, please feel free to practice that and, curiously just inquiring into that shape. So from your downward facing dog, you might like to float forward into a plank pose. So our plank pose looks like the top of a press up. So you might be in your plank pose with your knees off the floor, in which case you would want to really tuck your tail under. We want to avoid arching or collapsing into our lower back. So you want to lift your bottom up to the height of your shoulders, tuck your tail under and draw your belly in. You could also practice that same shape with your knees on the floor. Again, you can still tuck your tail in, draw your belly up. You can also bring your elbows to the floor if your wrists are becoming tired or you have sore wrists. An elbow plank can be done with knees on or off the floor as well. So there's lots of options there. When you're ready, let's all float our knees back to the floor and then bring ourselves back towards child's pose again. Just pausing for a moment here in child's pose. And then you might draw your hands along the floor, perhaps taking your arms up and overhead. You could be sitting on your knees in Vajrasana, or if your knees are sore here, you might be standing on your knees instead. And then hands can come back down to your heart, arriving here and taking a moment. Perhaps feeling your breath flowing in and out. Softening through your face, through your shoulders. Reconnecting to breath, to sensations, emotions, thoughts, whatever might be your present moment experience. And then when you're ready, let's go through that little sequence once more. So maybe you might begin by sliding down and back into child's pose. You might like to creep your fingers a little further forward and really begin to feel a sense of length through your arms, through your armpits, perhaps through your ribs. And as you're breathing here, you might feel the sensation of ribs expanding, armpits expanding, lungs expanding, and everything letting go as you breathe out. And when you're ready, you might come up onto your hands and knees and tuck your toes under, lifting up your hips and finding your downward facing dog. Now remembering that you can practice your down dog with bent knees, especially if you feel as though that helps you to elongate your spine. However, you might also begin to straighten your knees, and you might find that your heels are lifted, or maybe your heels are down towards the floor. From this position, you might notice that your base of support is your hands and your feet. So can you spread your fingers wide and press all of the knuckles and the palm of your hand down into the floor? Can you also notice the parts of your feet that are in contact with the floor and really sense that connection? From your hands, there's a line of energy flowing up towards your shoulders and along your spine, and a similar line of energy can flow from your feet up through your legs to your sitting bones. At the point where our legs join our torso, that line of energy crosses over and flows back down the other side, so we're both lifting away from and connecting down toward the floor at the same time. So that was a long hold in that shape. Let's float our way forward to downward to plank pose. Remember, you can have full plank with your hands on the floor and your knees off the floor, tail tucked, hips at the height of shoulders, or you might have your knees down on the floor or your elbows down on the floor. Nice and strong through your front body, remembering to continue to keep breathing. And then when you're ready, let's lower our feet, knees to the floor, dropping your hips back to your heels. You might like to let this be a really easy child's pose. Maybe you bring your hands under your head, or perhaps you drop your hands back towards your feet. And maybe you're still here taking a few easy breaths. Or maybe you're rocking a little from side to side. And then as you're ready, you might like to make your way down onto your back. And as you come to the floor, perhaps you might take your arms out towards your sides, and it might be helpful just to step your feet a little bit wider than your hips. So maybe your feet are about almost on the edges of your mat if you're practicing on a mat, or just a little wider than your hips. And then from here you might begin to let your knees drop to one side, and maybe your head starts to track towards your other shoulder. And maybe you spend a moment or two here. And when you're ready to come back to center, it might be interesting just to lift your top leg first, and then your lower leg might follow along behind. And then you might roll your knees to your other side, and perhaps your head turns. Again, you might just pause there and allow that sense of gravity and weightedness. And then again, maybe your top leg begins to lift first, and your lower leg comes along behind. And then you're welcome to practice your twist as one that includes this continual movement from side to side, if that's feeling as though it's the most nourishing or helpful choice for you. Or you're welcome to just pause and twist over to one side, and maybe you hold that for a few breaths and then move to your other side. And if you have a different way that you like to practice your twist, you're absolutely welcome to do that, because it's your practice and it's your body. And if you do know that you have a favorite twist and that's the only one you ever do, maybe today you might try a different one. Our bodies have the capacity for so much movement. And for many of us, we repeat the same movements over and over again. We become very good at them. They become very ingrained. So even just changing it slightly, Just a slight change can create new possibilities for movement. And because our bodies and our minds and our hearts can never really be separated, when we create new possibilities for movement, we create new pathways for being. New pathways for experiencing, growing, developing, discovering. New pathways for life, for living. So wherever you are, you might like to just take a few more moments just to finish off what you're doing. And gradually finding your way towards center again and coming to a resting shape. So rest is very unique for each person. You might choose that your resting shape today has your knees bent. Maybe your knees knock in towards each other for a little bit of support, and that might feel nice and easy on your lower back. If you do have a bolster or a rolled up blanket or some cushions, then you might choose to place them behind the backs of your knees and extend your legs out long. Or maybe you feel really comfortable lying out long with no support behind your knees. And for some people, upright is a more helpful way to rest, so you might choose to come into a seated shape. It's absolutely your choice. But taking time to settle yourself into the shape that you've chosen so that your whole body can begin to drop into a sense of ease, a felt sense of ease. And for most of us, ease is something that we know somehow, or maybe we have a memory of it. So even if you might not be experiencing a lot of ease at the moment, if this is a very challenging and uncertain time for you, perhaps you might begin to call on your imagination, which is a wonderful tool that you possess, to remember or recall a time when you did feel easeful, when you did feel well, when you felt secure. And maybe you might use your imagination to conjure up the image of a place where you feel at ease. Maybe your medicine is nature, so maybe there's a beautiful place in nature that you know of, or one that you imagine. Or maybe your medicine is your home, or a home from childhood. Or maybe it is a person, or perhaps a pet, or a friend. So if it helps, you might spend a moment just connecting to that which brings a felt sense of ease and well-being into your body. And if it's challenging to connect to that sense of ease and well-being today, then maybe just welcoming a sense of, I'm okay. Right now in this moment, I'm okay. Perhaps it helps to extend your exhalation a little bit more. You might take a slightly longer breath out. And as you're breathing out, you might imagine or feel as though your body's growing a little heavier or wider or deeper. And then taking this precious, precious moment to just be here, to rest, to receive, to let go, to soften, to deepen, widen, whatever your way in to rest is. Perhaps you feel or experience your breath flowing in and out like a gentle wave lapping the shore. Maybe your experience of breath is one of expansion and return, or widening and softening. Maybe you have another way that your breath is currently being experienced. And in this moment of rest, in this moment of relative stillness, of okayness, maybe even of ease, you might like to bring to mind something that you wish very dearly for. So maybe this is a wish for wellness, or a wish for community, or a wish for healing or wholeness. Perhaps your wish is just for yourself. Perhaps your wish also includes family, friends, or your wider community, or our planet. all wishes are valid and so important. So perhaps you might take a moment to welcome in the sense of this intention, this wish, dream or goal that you have. Connecting to what inspires us is so important. Connecting to where we hold hope is so important. Once again, calling on your wondrous imagination to really see and feel and experience this moment that you're creating. This wish, dream, intention, goal, hope. Allowing it to fill every little part of your whole being so that you know this. You know this. Your body, your heart, your mind, your spirit knows this as real in this moment. When you're ready, you might like to just tuck that away inside as an inner resource that you have to call upon when you need it. And perhaps you might begin to take a few deeper breaths, and maybe you might begin to wriggle and squirm and stretch. Of course, you're really welcome because it's your own home to stay here for as long as you choose. But if you would like to, you might roll over to one side. And then you might begin to use your hands to find your way up from there. And as you're arriving, if you're arriving into a seated shape, perhaps you might begin to place the palms of your hands together at your heart, or you might rest one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. Perhaps allowing your head to drop a little bit towards your heart. And just sitting here for a moment. And although you may well be practicing on your own today, you might like to take a moment just to feel out into the wider community and into the wider humanity for all those who are practicing right now, for all those who are noticing their breath, who are with their experiences, because we are still connected. Every moment of every day, we are still connected. Thank you for taking the time to connect here with me through this medium of internet. I hope you are all well. I hope you are all okay. I really look forward to seeing you again in person as soon as life allows. So namaste, dear ones. Take care.